What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to Kelsey's Corner. You either clicked on this video because you're a sick motherfucker or you think I'm a sick motherfucker. Nah, I'm just kidding. I know that you clicked on it because you understand my sense of humor because I am hilarious. Quick shout out to Corbin if you're watching. That's my cousin. He's been watching my videos, so I just wanted to give a quick shout out to him and say thank you for watching. Even though you make fun of me for my accent, but that's okay. I don't care. I'm proud of it. So in today's video, I'm going to share with you 6 surefire ways to kill your snake. And before I jump into the video, I also want to let y'all know that I have swapped my Instagram account over from Kelsey's Corner Friends to a new account, which is called Kelsey's Constrictors. I will type it out here. It's going to work out a little bit better for me. I'm going to try to make it as professional as possible. It's going to be my niche Instagram specifically for snakes. I'm not going to be posting anything else except maybe on my story or something like that. But all my posts and reels and stuff like that are all going to be based on snakes exactly. So I'm hoping that Instagram will be able to look at my account and say, oh, this girl is a snake breeder. This is what she does, is just snakes. So I think that that'll help my engagement and my suggested people to follow me and stuff like that a little bit more. So if you'd like to follow me there, I'll throw a link in the description box below. You can just click it and go follow me. Unfortunately, I had a snake pass away this week. She was almost full grown, so it really came out of the blue for me. It obviously was completely unexpected. I was just doing my normal checkups, which I usually try to check on every single snake every couple of days, and unfortunately I found her in there deceased. And on top of that, it was already starting to smell, which means the decomposition process had already begun, which means I could not get a necropsy to find out what exactly happened. So sadly, I will never know what actually caused her to die, but I was not very happy about it. Obviously, I was actually extremely upset about it, but I didn't cry this time, so that's good. But I was very upset about it because she was going to be a key part of my projects for next year. I know a lot of people don't really talk about the fact that animals die all the time. I told several people what had happened, and almost every single one said that they either had snakes die this year or they knew several people who had snakes die this year. So it's not something that people talk about all the time, and I've been toying with making a video about things that people don't really talk about in the reptile community, things that happen all the time, such as animals that die and stuff like that. So if that's something you'd like to see, let me know. It's just an idea that I've had in my head. So before I list out the 6 things that could kill your snake, I just want to say snakes are pretty hardy animals in general, at least ones like ball pythons, boas. Some snakes, including like green tree pythons, are boreal species that are kind of rare to find as far as people having them as pets go. They are a little more finicky and things have to be a little more exact for them. But for snakes like ball pythons and boas, which as you know I kind of focus on, they're pretty hardy in general. It kind of takes a lot of doing these mistakes to actually kill them, but that being said, just like humans, some snakes will have a weaker immune system than others, or they may have a birth defect or something like that that's gonna exacerbate any of these things that you may do. And some snakes could die from one thing and then other ones may not. But these are some very general things that you should try to hone in on and avoid, because even though they're hardy, they still have needs. Just like we need to eat a certain amount of food or drink a certain amount of water per day, if we move away from those things as humans that are really ideal for us, it may not hurt us short term, but it could affect us in the long term. So snakes are kind of the same way. One day of having the temperature 5 degrees higher than ideal is probably not going to kill them. One day of having 40% humidity instead of 70 or 80% humidity probably isn't going to kill them, but over time it can shorten the lifespan of the snake. It can really affect their health and it could kill them. So going off of that example I just gave, one of those things is going to be your humidity. For ball pythons and boas, ideally their humidity needs to be anywhere from 70 to 80% on a daily basis. The side effects of a snake not having the correct humidity could be respiratory infections, having a bad shed, which as I've talked about in some of my other videos can leave them with eye caps. If it continues over time, it can give them an infection or it can block their vision. Dehydrations is one of the main results from not having the correct humidity, and dehydration can cause a slew of other problems, including something like urate impaction, which I actually had a snake die from earlier this year. It can actually cause their eyes to dent in. I'll attach a picture right here so that you can see what that looks like. It looks really weird. It just kind of creases in and it looks like a triangle or maybe even like a inverted oval, kind of like how contacts look. Their eye will actually cave in a little bit if they're really dehydrated. A respiratory infection can be fatal to your snake, and it's also very contagious. So if one snake gets a respiratory infection, you potentially are introducing that to your entire collection, which requires antibiotics to treat, which could be extremely expensive for you. Obviously, if dehydration has been going on for a while, the urate impaction will cause them not to be able to poop. They also won't eat, and then they will eventually die. If you're having trouble keeping your humidity at the levels that it should be, there's a couple of things you can do. One is to buy a mister just like this. It's a pump, so I have a snake in my hand, I can't really do this, but you just pump this until it gets really, really difficult to push it down. And this one that I have actually has a button here, so when you push it down, you can slide this in and it will continually spray. I try to mist my snakes once a day, at least every couple of days, especially because I'm actually going to touch on this in a little bit, but for some reason, this rack, I have a really hard time keeping the humidity right in it. I think I know the reason why it's like that, but like I said, I'll touch up on that in a second. Another main way to keep your snake hydrated is to make sure they have clean water all the time, and make sure that their bowl is big enough that they can actually get inside it and soak if they want to. That will also help if they're having a bad shed. They can get in the water, they can soak, and make sure they get their shed off in one piece. Temperature is another crucial thing for your snakes. For ball pythons, you want the temperature to be anywhere from 85 to 88 degrees. If the temperature gets hotter than that, it can cause a thermal burn, especially if you don't have enough substrate in the bottom of your bin or tank. They can lay on top of the glass or the plastic, and it can actually cause a burn on the bottom of their stomach. If it's bad enough, it can kill them. So last night when I was cleaning snake bins, I pulled one out. Substrate went all over the floor. I didn't notice it at first, but when I went to dump it, it got all over the floor in front of the trash can, and I was like, what the heck? So once I had dumped all the substrate, I saw that there was a hole in the actual tub. And this is what the hole looks like. So that bin got completely burned straight through the plastic. And when I looked inside the rack, the heat tape was all buckled up underneath, and obviously there was a big piece of plastic that was melted to the heat tape. I ended up finding out that the probe had come off of the heat tape, which was taped on there. So obviously it was not regulating the temperature of the rack. So somehow the heat tape got bent up somehow when I was putting the bin in there, and I guess it just overheated the bin and it melted the plastic right out of the bin. Temperature is crucial. You have to have a thermostat. You have to make sure that your probe is placed properly. Even if you put it right the first time, you should always check it periodically because it can come off. Things happen when you open the bin, especially if the probe is close to the side of the bin or something. It could knock it loose, anything like that. So make sure you have a thermostat and make sure it's being used properly. If the temperature is too cold, then it will slow their metabolism down. Now, if a snake's metabolism slows down, obviously they're going to be lethargic. This is also going to mess up their digestion. Because snakes are cold-blooded, after they eat, they have to be warm enough, they have to lay on a hot spot for their food to actually digest. They can't create their own body heat. So that's one reason why after you feed your snake, you may notice that they're laying in their hot spot for a few days afterwards. That's just helping their digestion process along. So if your temperature is not warm enough, then they aren't able to digest their food. They could potentially regurgitate it. It could sit in their stomach and rot, and then they could get an infection and they could die. There's several different things that can happen if the temperature is not warm enough, so make sure that that is on point. Snakes also go off instinct, so if they've been cold for a while, they actually will refuse food because they know that their body can't digest it at this time. And that moves us right into our next point. When you're feeding snakes, you want to make sure you're feeding them on a correct schedule. Ball pythons, my adults, I feed, depending on how big they are and depending on what they're eating, I feed them every 2 to 3 weeks. And for my babies, I feed every 5 to 7 days. And then once they get to 500 grams, I drop it down to every 7 to 10 days. As far as ball pythons go, they're known to be kind of picky eaters at times, so it's harder to overfeed a ball python. Obviously, there are exceptions to this rule. There may be a snake that just wolfs down food every single time you put it in front of them, but it's really not the case too much with ball pythons. Now, from what I've heard, as far as boa constrictors go, they are kind of like pigs, and they will eat whatever you put in front of them at any time of the day, as frequently as you give them food. You do have to be careful if you have boas not to feed them too often because they can get overweight. And just like a human, the fat can accumulate around their organs, it can cause organ failure, and they could end up dying from being obese. Another way food could kill your snake is if you're feeding too large of prey items. For ball pythons and boas, you want to feed a rat that is about the same size as they are. You can go a little bigger for ball pythons, but try to keep the width of the rodent about the same as the biggest part of their body. If the rodent is too big for them, they could end up regurgitating it, or it could cause other internal problems for them. If the rodent is too small, well, then you could end up starving them. As I said earlier, snakes are pretty hardy, so it does take a lot to actually truly starve a snake, but I've seen some snakes in pretty bad condition from underfeeding. You do want to make sure that you have that correct. Poor cleanliness practices is the fifth thing that could kill your snake. I had someone tell me earlier this week that they knew someone whose snake died because there was a spider in the bin and it bit the snake and the snake ended up dying. That may or may not be a cleanliness problem, but you definitely should be checking on your snakes every couple of days. Check their bin, make sure their substrate is clean. There shouldn't be any poop left in there. There shouldn't be any shed left in there. Snakes, especially ball pythons and boas, they live in a humid environment. When it's dark and damp and wet, this is a place where all kinds of bacteria and mold likes to grow. So if you have a shed skin in the dark, damp bin that you have them in, that is just a huge invitation for lots of different kinds of bacteria and mold to grow in there. Dead skin can harbor all kinds of nasty stuff, so you want to make sure you take that shed out so that stuff doesn't start growing on it and potentially impact your snake. Another thing I want to touch on as far as cleanliness goes is making sure you don't leave rats in the bin too long. I feed some of my snakes live. I feed some of my snakes frozen thawed rats. When you're feeding frozen thawed rats, do not leave it in there longer than overnight. I would say the same for live, and as far as the time frame goes, I will stick with that, but you never want to leave a live rat unattended with your snake. If the snake is afraid of it, or if they're not hungry, or if the rat is aggressive, anything like that, the rat can actually hurt your snake, so you should always supervise if you're feeding live. I do not know what they're called. It's some sort of fly. I want to say it's a fruit fly, but I don't think it is. But there's a type of fly that if you leave a dead rat in the open, thawed out, decomposing, and disgusting, these flies are attracted to it. They're nature's little insect vultures, so obviously they're there to help and to clean up the dead, decomposing flesh, but they multiply insanely fast. So once you have a couple of them in a bin somewhere, and they also like poop, I've noticed. Once you have them accumulating in a bin somewhere, they breed like crazy, and then you have thousands and thousands of flies in your house in every single bin you have, and it's disgusting. So make sure you're on top of any dead animals that you are putting in the bin overnight or trying to feed to your snakes, because once you get that infestation of those disgusting flies, they're extremely difficult to get rid of. And that is 6 ways to kill your snake. Now here's what I want to say. It's not always your fault. Sometimes things happen. Just like people, just like dogs and cats, snakes can get cancer. I had someone tell me earlier this week that if your snake has bright green poop, he was told that the vet said it could be liver cancer. So snakes get cancer, snakes get heart attacks. Sometimes there's nothing you can do, which is why necropsy is really great as far as peace of mind goes. But that being said, this is also why it is crucial to do a very good thorough checkup of your snake before you buy it. And that is also why it's crucial to quarantine your snake before you put it in with your other snakes. I know someone who recently lost almost their entire collection from a type of virus that snakes can get. Sometimes things just can't be avoided, but if you're doing your due diligence, following every single step along the way, and doing the best you can, you're minimizing your risk to the absolute extreme low, and it's gonna help you avoid a lot of problems and hopefully help you avoid any deaths in your snake family. If you haven't seen my other video where I talk about how to choose a breeder and how to choose a healthy snake, I will link it up here. I talk about everything that you should think about and go through and all the checkups you should do before you bring a snake home for the first time. And I also have a video on quarantine procedures, which is what you should do as soon as you buy a snake before you put it into the rest of your collection. This is going to minimize any kind of diseases, mites, or parasites that you could pass on to your other snakes, because a lot of stuff is contagious. And that's all I have for today's video. Thanks for watching. If you love snakes, hit that subscribe button. I come out with new videos every single week. Throw a comment down below if you have any questions or anything I missed. Make sure you check out our new page on Instagram. It's Kelsey's Constrictors, and I'll see y'all next time.